What if the modern world as we know it simply didn't exist? No steaming cups of coffee to jumpstart your morning, no hospitals to heal the sick, no complex equations to unlock the mysteries of science. These everyday realities owe their existence to a single, dazzling chapter of human history. Picture an era where scholars, inventors, and visionaries pushed the boundaries of knowledge so far that their discoveries still echo in our lives today. This was the Islamic Golden Age, a period stretching from the 8th to the 14th century, when the world witnessed an explosion of innovation unlike anything before it. Yet, despite its monumental impact, so many of its breakthroughs have faded into obscurity, overshadowed by time. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 30 of these forgotten marvels, inventions so revolutionary, they quietly built the foundations of our modern world. Think about the last time you walked into a hospital. The very idea of an organized medical center with dedicated wards and trained physicians wasn't just born overnight. It was pioneered centuries ago by minds working under the banner of this golden era. Or consider the intricate equations you might have struggled with in school. Algebra, a word derived from Arabic, was systematized and refined during this time, giving us the tools to navigate everything from architecture to astronomy. These weren't just small steps forward, they were seismic leaps that redefined what humanity could achieve. But here's what's even more astonishing. For every famous invention, there are dozens of others that have slipped through the cracks of history, waiting to be rediscovered. This video is a journey into that overlooked legacy. We'll uncover engineering feats that defied the limits of their time, medical innovations that saved countless lives, and everyday conveniences that we now take for granted, all born from a culture of curiosity and relentless experimentation. These weren't just random strokes of luck. They were the result of a society that valued knowledge, embraced diversity, and dared to ask, what if? So, whether you're a history buff, a science enthusiast, or simply someone who loves a good story of human ingenuity, prepare to be amazed. Because by the end of this exploration, you'll see the world and the hidden fingerprints of the Islamic Golden Age in a whole new light. To truly grasp the magnitude of the Islamic Golden Age, we need to step back into a world where knowledge wasn't just valued, it was actively cultivated, shared, and celebrated. Imagine bustling cities like Baghdad, where the streets hummed with the energy of scholars, merchants, and artisans from every corner of the known world. This wasn't just a time of isolated brilliance, it was a symphony of collaboration, fueled by the Abbasid Caliphate's unwavering commitment to progress. At the heart of it all stood the House of Wisdom, a legendary institution where Greek, Persian, Indian, and Syriac texts were translated into Arabic, preserving ancient wisdom while sparking new ideas. But what made this era so extraordinary? It wasn't just the towering libraries or the glittering courts of enlightened rulers, though they played a crucial role. It was the very ethos of the time. Paper, a revolutionary import from China, replaced cumbersome parchment and papyrus, making books more affordable and accessible. Suddenly, knowledge could spread faster and farther than ever before. Rival dynasties, from the Umayyads in Cordoba to the Fatimids in Cairo, competed not just in wealth or power, but in their patronage of science and art. Scholars weren't confined by borders or backgrounds. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim thinkers worked side by side, debating, experimenting, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. This cultural alchemy didn't just produce incremental advances, it redefined entire fields. Take medicine, for instance. While Europe clung to outdated theories, physicians in Baghdad were conducting surgeries with precision instruments and compiling encyclopedias of anatomy. Or consider astronomy. Observatories dotted the landscape, their instruments so precise they could predict celestial events centuries in advance. Even the concept of the modern university, with its emphasis on rigorous study and debate, traces its roots to the madrasas of this era. Yet perhaps the most striking thing about this period was its sheer inclusivity. Knowledge wasn't hoarded, it was shared, refined, and built upon. A Persian mathematician's breakthrough in algebra might inspire an Andalusian engineer to design a new water clock, while a Syrian astronomer's star charts could guide an Egyptian navigator across the Indian Ocean. This was a world where curiosity knew no limits and innovation was a collective endeavor. So when we marvel at the inventions that emerged, from the first cameras to the foundations of chemistry, we're not just looking at isolated feats of genius. We're witnessing the fruits of a civilization that believed deeply and unshakably in the power of ideas to change the world. Picture holding a device so advanced it could tell time, predict the movement of stars, and guide ships across uncharted oceans, all without a single microchip or battery. This wasn't some futuristic gadget. It was the Astrolabe, a masterpiece of medieval engineering that became the cornerstone of navigation and astronomy for centuries. Often dubbed the smartphone of its time, this handheld wonder wasn't just a tool. It was a testament to the Islamic Golden Age's relentless pursuit of precision and practicality. The brilliance of the Astrolabe lay in its elegant simplicity. Made of brass or wood, it featured a series of rotating discs etched with intricate markings, each one a carefully calculated representation of the night sky. By aligning these discs with the horizon, users could determine their latitude, track the positions of celestial bodies, and even calculate prayer times with remarkable accuracy. But what made it truly revolutionary was its versatility. Sailors relied on it to navigate treacherous seas, while farmers used it to plan planting seasons based on stellar patterns. Scholars like Al-Farghani didn't just refine its design, they transformed it into a portable observatory, blending mathematics and artistry in a way that felt almost magical. Yet the Astrolabe's impact went far beyond its immediate uses. It became a bridge between cultures, spreading from the bustling markets of Baghdad to the universities of medieval Europe. Christopher Columbus himself depended on a version of this device during his voyages, proving its enduring legacy. And here's the fascinating part. While modern technology has rendered the Astrolabe obsolete, its underlying principles still echo in today's GPS systems and star mapping software. It's a reminder that innovation isn't just about creating something new, it's about solving real-world problems with creativity and precision. What's often overlooked, though, is the human story behind this invention. Crafting an astrolabe wasn't just a technical feat. It demanded an intimate understanding of astronomy, geometry, and metalworking skills honed through years of collaboration across disciplines. Artisans and scientists worked side by side, their workshops buzzing with debates about celestial movements and the finer points of spherical trigonometry. This wasn't just a device, it was a symbol of an era that refused to compartmentalize knowledge. Whether in the hands of a merchant navigating the Silk Road or a scholar plotting the heavens, the astrolabe embodied a singular truth: that curiosity, when paired with craftsmanship, could unlock the secrets of the universe. Now imagine a world without equations, where the very language of science and engineering simply didn't exist. That's the reality we'd face if not for one man's revolutionary work, the Persian mathematician Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. His name might not roll off the tongue today, but his legacy is etched into every math textbook, every skyscraper's blueprint, and even the code running on your smartphone. In the early 9th century, Al-Khwarizmi didn't just tinker with numbers. He gave us an entirely new way of thinking. His seminal book, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, introduced the world to algebra, a term derived from the Arabic al-jabr, meaning reunion of broken parts. What made his approach so transformative? Before Al-Khwarizmi, mathematics was largely a collection of scattered techniques for solving specific problems. He saw beyond the chaos, recognizing patterns that could be distilled into universal rules. By systematically solving linear and quadratic equations, he turned math into a language of symbols and formulas, a toolkit that could be applied to anything from splitting inheritances to calculating planetary orbits. His work didn't just stop at theory, it was intensely practical. Merchants used his methods to balance trade ledgers, architects employed them to design soaring domes, and astronomers relied on them to map the heavens. But here's where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. Centuries after his death, Al-Khwarizmi's texts were translated into Latin, sparking a mathematical renaissance in Europe. Scholars pored over his writings, adapting his methods to lay the groundwork for everything from calculus to cryptography. Even the word algorithm owes its existence to a Latinized version of his name, proof of how deeply his ideas permeated modern thought. Yet algebra's impact goes far beyond equations on a page. It's the invisible scaffolding holding up our technological world. Without it, there'd be no physics to explain the cosmos, no engineering to build bridges, and no computer science to power artificial intelligence. Every time you use a search engine or stream a video, you're benefiting from algebraic logic refined over 1,000 years ago. Al-Khwarizmi's genius wasn't just in solving problems, it was in creating a system so robust, so adaptable, that it became the bedrock of human progress. And that's perhaps the most extraordinary equation of all. One man's curiosity multiplied by time equals the foundation of our modern world. Long before sterile corridors and electronic charts defined healthcare, a quiet revolution was unfolding in the bustling cities of the Islamic world. Imagine walking into a 9th century hospital, not a makeshift infirmary or a monk's cloister, but a sprawling complex where light-filled wards separated patients by illness. Surgeons trained in anatomy performed precise procedures, and pharmacists dispensed remedies distilled from centuries of herbal knowledge. This was Al-Idrisi Hospital in Baghdad, a marvel of its age and the blueprint for modern medical care. What set these institutions apart wasn't just their scale, but their vision: healthcare as a right, not a privilege. At the heart of this system was a radical idea that medicine should be grounded in evidence, not superstition. Pioneers like Al-Idrisi, often called the father of pediatrics, didn't just treat symptoms. They meticulously documented case histories, comparing treatments to determine what actually worked. His groundbreaking text, the comprehensive book on medicine, wasn't a collection of folk remedies but a systematic guide based on observation and experimentation. He even conducted one of history's first controlled experiments by selecting two groups with similar symptoms and testing different therapies to see which proved more effective. This empirical approach laid the foundation for modern clinical trials, but the hospitals of the Islamic Golden Age were more than just buildings, they were ecosystems of learning. Medical students didn't just memorize texts, they apprenticed beside seasoned physicians, rotating through wards to study everything from fevers to fractures. Licensing exams ensured only qualified practitioners could treat patients, a concept Europe wouldn't adopt for centuries, and perhaps most strikingly, these institutions were profoundly egalitarian. Rich or poor, Muslim or Christian, all received free care funded by charitable endowments called WACFs, a model that echoes in today's public health systems. The legacy of these innovations stretches far beyond their time. When Europe's first major hospitals emerged in places like Paris and Vienna, they drew direct inspiration from Islamic models. The idea of separating patients by condition to prevent cross-infection, rooted in Al-Idrisi's wards, the emphasis on hygiene and fresh air, refined by physicians like Ibn Sina, who wrote that illness could spread through contaminated water centuries before germ theory. Even the concept of a teaching hospital, where education and care intertwine, traces its lineage to these medieval centers of healing. Yet what's often lost in this history is the humanity behind the breakthroughs. These hospitals weren't cold institutions but places of compassion, where musicians played to soothe patients' nerves and gardens offered spaces for recovery. In an age when much of the world still saw disease as divine punishment, the Islamic Golden Age dared to believe something revolutionary, that healing was a science, an art, and above all, a collective responsibility. That conviction, written into the very walls of Al-Idrisi, still pulses through every modern hospital corridor today. There's a reason the world runs on coffee, and it all began with a few curious goats. According to legend, an Ethiopian herder named Kaldi noticed his flock dancing with unusual energy after nibbling bright red berries from a certain shrub. Intrigued, he tried the berries himself and felt the same invigorating surge. Though this tale might lean into myth, what followed was anything but fictional. By the 15th century, coffee had traveled across the Red Sea to Yemen, where Sufi monks embraced it as a secret weapon for their nocturnal devotions. Brewing the berries into a bitter, potent drink, they found it sharpened their focus during long nights of prayer, a natural ally in their spiritual discipline. But coffee's journey didn't stop at monastery walls. In the bustling port city of Mocha, the drink evolved into a social elixir. Roasters perfected techniques to enhance its flavor, while merchants traded beans along caravan routes. Soon, coffee houses called kave-khane sprang up across the Islamic world, from Damascus to Cairo. These weren't just places to sip a warm beverage, they were dynamos of intellectual exchange. Scholars debated philosophy over steaming cups, merchants hashed out deals, and poets recited verses to rapt audiences. Ottoman Turks even dubbed them schools of the wise, recognizing their role as incubators for ideas as much as caffeine. The real twist in coffee's story, though, came when it reached Europe. Venetian traders first smuggled beans past wary authorities who feared the bitter invention of Satan. But once Pope Clement Roman VIII took a sip and reportedly declared it delicious, coffee's fate was sealed. London's coffee houses became known as penny universities, where for the price of a cup, anyone could join debates on science, politics, or literature. The French Revolution was allegedly plotted over café tables, while Bach composed an opera celebrating the drink. What's often overlooked is how coffee reshaped global economics. The demand for beans fueled vast plantations, redrawing trade maps and even sparking conflicts. Yet its most enduring legacy might be cultural. Before coffee, alcohol dominated social gatherings in many societies. Here was a drink that sharpened minds instead of clouding them, a catalyst for clarity in an age of awakening. Today, when you queue at a cafe for your morning latte, you're part of a tradition stretching back to those Yemeni monks and their restless goats. A humble berry didn't just wake up the world, it caffeinated the course of history itself. The scalpel in a surgeon's hand today isn't just a tool, it's a direct descendant of a 1,000-year-old revolution. Picture a 10th century operating room in Al-Andalus, where Abu al-Qasim al-Zarawi, known in the West as Al-Bukhari, was redefining what surgery could be. At a time when much of the world still saw medical procedures as crude and dangerous, Al-Zarawi approached his craft with the precision of an artist and the rigor of a scientist. His 30-volume encyclopedia, Kitab al-Tasrif, wasn't just a collection of techniques. It was a masterclass in surgical innovation, complete with detailed illustrations of over 200 instruments, many of which would look startlingly familiar to modern surgeons. Take the humble forceps, for example. Before Al-Zarawi, extracting teeth or removing objects from wounds was a brutal, often deadly affair. His designs introduced carefully angled tips and ergonomic handles, allowing for delicate maneuvers that minimized tissue damage. Then there were his breakthroughs in suturing. He popularized the use of catgut, a material derived from animal intestines which could dissolve naturally in the body, eliminating the need for painful second surgeries to remove stitches. Even his scalpels, with their finely balanced weight and razor-sharp edges, were engineered for control, reducing the risk of slips during intricate procedures. But what truly set Al-Zarawi apart was his insistence on documentation. Every tool, every technique was meticulously described and illustrated in his manuals, creating a knowledge base that transcended borders. When European scholars translated Kitab al-Tasrif into Latin, it became the definitive surgical textbook for over 500 years. Renaissance surgeons pored over its pages, adopting instruments like bone saws and obstetric hooks that had been refined centuries earlier. The irony is profound. Many of the advancements credited to later European medicine were, in fact, rediscoveries of Al-Zarawi's work. Yet his legacy goes beyond hardware. He championed principles we now take for granted, sterilizing instruments with boiling water, using anesthesia derived from opium and mandrake, and prioritizing patient comfort. He even designed specialized tools for women's health, including gynecological speculums and birthing aids, at a time when such care was often neglected. In an era riddled with superstition, Al-Zarawi's approach was strikingly modern. Observe, experiment, and above all, do no harm. The next time you hear about a life-saving surgical breakthrough, remember this: the foundations weren't laid in a gleaming 21st century lab, but in the candlelit workshops of medieval Spain. Al-Zarawi's tools didn't just change medicine. They forged a new ethos, one where skill, precision, and compassion could turn the most terrifying ordeal into a calculated act of healing. And that's a cutting-edge idea that never goes out of style. Imagine a world where capturing an image wasn't just about pointing a lens, it was about unlocking the very secrets of light itself. That's exactly what the 11th century scholar Ibn al-Haytham achieved with his groundbreaking work on the Camera Obscura. While ancient Greeks like Aristotle had observed the curious way light could project images through tiny openings, they dismissed it as a mere curiosity. But al-Haytham saw something revolutionary, a window into understanding vision itself. His experiments in a darkened room, where he meticulously studied how light passing through a pinhole could project crisp, inverted images onto a surface, didn't just debunk outdated theories, they laid the foundation for everything from modern photography to the telescopes that would later map the stars. What made his approach so transformative? Unlike his predecessors, al-Haytham didn't rely on abstract philosophy. He built a systematic, experimental framework, testing variables like aperture size and distance to understand exactly how light behaved. His seminal work, Book of Optics, didn't just describe the camera obscura. It dismantled the Greek idea that eyes emitted rays to see objects. Instead, he proved vision occurred when light reflected off objects entered the eye, a concept so fundamental it's still taught in classrooms today. But his genius didn't stop at theory. He engineered portable versions of the Camera Obscura, turning it into a tool for artists and astronomers alike. Painters in Renaissance Europe would later use these devices to master perspective, tracing the projected images to create lifelike scenes with unprecedented accuracy. The ripple effects of this invention are staggering. Without Al-Haytham's insights, Galileo might never have refined the telescope, and the photographic revolution of the 19th century could have stalled before it began. Even today's digital cameras rely on the same core principle, controlling light to capture an image. Yet perhaps the most striking part of this story is how it reflects the Islamic Golden Age's broader ethos, a relentless curiosity that turned simple observations into world-changing tools. The Camera Obscura wasn't just a gadget, it was a testament to the power of questioning, experimenting, and seeing the world quite literally in a whole new light. When you picture a windmill, chances are you imagine the iconic Dutch designs with their sweeping horizontal sails. But centuries before those dotted Europe's landscape, an entirely different kind of windmill was turning in the windswept plains of Persia. These weren't just primitive prototypes, they were sophisticated machines, their vertical sails spinning like giant egg beaters to harness the desert winds with startling efficiency. Built as early as the 9th century, these Persian windmills weren't merely decorative, they were lifelines transforming barren landscapes into fertile hubs of agriculture and industry. What set these early windmills apart was their ingenious vertical axis design. Unlike their European counterparts that needed to pivot to face changing winds, Persian engineers crafted sails that caught breezes from any direction. Arranged in a cylindrical structure with vents to channel airflow, they could grind grain or draw water from deep wells without constant adjustment. This adaptability made them ideal for the harsh, unpredictable winds of the Iranian plateau. Villages that once relied on back-breaking manual labor suddenly had a renewable power source, allowing them to irrigate crops in regions where water was scarce. The impact was transformative. Communities flourished in places once written off as uninhabitable, but the brilliance of these windmills extended beyond their mechanics. They were part of a larger ecosystem of innovation. Persian engineers paired them with intricate systems of underground canals called qanats, creating a sustainable water network that turned deserts into breadbaskets. This synergy between wind and water management was centuries ahead of its time, showcasing a holistic approach to solving real-world challenges. When European travelers later encountered these structures, they brought the concept home, adapting the technology into the horizontal windmills we recognize today. What's often forgotten is how democratic this technology was. Windmills weren't reserved for wealthy elites. They dotted the countryside, serving entire communities. The knowledge to build and maintain them spread along trade routes from the Middle East to Central Asia and beyond. Even now, remnants of these ancient windmills still stand in northeastern Iran, their weathered sails whispering secrets of a time when innovation wasn't just about invention, but about lifting societies. The next time you see a wind turbine generating clean energy, remember, its lineage traces back to those Persian pioneers who looked at the relentless desert winds and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity. Ever struggled with a leaky pen ruining your favorite shirt? That exact frustration sparked one of the most overlooked innovations of the Islamic Golden Age. In the 10th century, Fatimid Caliph Al-Mu'izz Allah grew tired of messy quills and ink-stained robes, so he challenged his artisans to create something revolutionary, a pen that could write smoothly without dripping. Their solution, a slender brass tube with an ink reservoir and a cleverly designed nib that controlled flow using gravity and capillary action. This wasn't just a novelty, it was the world's first functional fountain pen, predating European versions by nearly 600 years. What made this invention so remarkable was its sophistication. Unlike dip pens that required constant reloading, this early fountain pen held enough ink for pages of uninterrupted writing. The secret lay in its precision, engineering the nib's tiny channel balanced air pressure and ink flow, preventing blots while maintaining a consistent line. Court scribes could now draft official documents without pausing to recharge their pens, boosting productivity in an era when bureaucracy relied entirely on handwritten records. Historians even uncovered a surviving description from the caliph's biographer, marveling at how the pen wrote without needing an inkwell, its supply lasting for days. Yet why didn't this marvel spread like wildfire? The answer reveals a fascinating twist in the story of innovation. While the design worked flawlessly, manufacturing required skilled metalworkers to handcraft each component, a luxury few could afford outside royal courts. Without mass production techniques, the pen remained a niche treasure rather than an everyday tool. Still, its existence shatters the common assumption that fountain pens were solely a European invention. When Louis Waterman patented his modern fountain pen in the 19th century, he was unknowingly echoing a solution devised centuries earlier in Cairo. Beyond its practicality, this invention symbolizes something deeper, an era that viewed problems as invitations to innovate. From the caliph's irritation with stains to the artisan's elegant solution, we see the Islamic Golden Age's essence, a culture that blended royal patronage with technical ingenuity to improve daily life. Today, as we click our ballpoints without a second thought, we're inheritors of that same spirit, one that turns everyday inconveniences into opportunities for progress. Long before ivy-covered halls and lecture podiums defined higher learning, a visionary woman planted the seeds of modern education in the heart of Morocco. In the year 859, Fatima al-Fihri, a wealthy merchant's daughter with an unshakable belief in knowledge's power, founded the University of Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez. What began as a modest mosque with attached classrooms soon blossomed into the world's first degree-granting university, a beacon of scholarship that has burned brightly for over 1,000 years. Unlike the scattered academies of antiquity, Al-Qarawiyyin wasn't just a place for occasional lectures. It was a structured institution where students progressed through rigorous courses, defended theses, and earned formal qualifications, a revolutionary concept that would redefine how humanity organizes knowledge. The university's curriculum was astonishingly diverse for its time. Within its arched courtyards, scholars grappled with Islamic law and theology alongside mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The library, which still stands today, became a treasure trove of manuscripts, including 9th-century copies of the Quran and works by philosophers like Ibn Rushd. But what truly set Al-Qarawiyyin apart was its egalitarian spirit. At a time when much of Europe confined learning to monastic cells, this institution welcomed students of all backgrounds, women and men, rich and poor, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. The Jewish philosopher Maimonides studied here, as did the pioneering cartographer Muhammad Al-Idrisi, whose maps would later guide European explorers. Al-Qarawiyyin's influence rippled far beyond North Africa. Its model of organized faculties, specialized degrees, and scholarly debate became the blueprint for Europe's first universities. When Bologna and Oxford emerged centuries later, they mirrored structures refined in Fez, proof that the Islamic Golden Age didn't just preserve ancient knowledge but reinvented how it could be shared. Even the tradition of academic regalia, those flowing gowns and square caps we associate with graduations, traces back to robes worn by Al-Qarawiyyin scholars. Yet perhaps the most remarkable thing about this institution isn't its age, but its endurance. While wars and plagues swept away other medieval centers of learning, Al-Jazari adapted without losing its core mission. Today, as students still gather in its ancient lecture halls, they walk in the footsteps of a woman who understood something profound. That education isn't just about transmitting facts, but about building a space where curiosity can thrive across generations. In a world obsessed with disruptive innovation, Al-Jazari stands as a quiet testament to a different kind of revolution, one where the flame of learning, once kindled, never goes out. Hidden inside nearly every car engine and factory machine today lies a deceptively simple component, one that traces its origins to a 12th century inventor sketching designs by candlelight. Ismail Al-Jazari, the brilliant polymath of the Artukid court, didn't just tinker with gadgets, he engineered the very bones of modern mechanics with his groundbreaking crankshaft. Described in his book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices, this wasn't just another invention, it was the missing link that would one day power everything from steam engines to sewing machines. Al-Jazari's genius lay in solving a problem that had stumped engineers for centuries: how to transform the smooth rotation of a wheel into the back and forth motion needed for pumps, saws, and other tools. His solution, a rotating arm connected to a rod pivoting like a dancer's knee, the world's first crankshaft. Picture his water-raising machines. As an animal turned a wheel, the crankshaft converted that circular energy into a piston's rhythmic plunge, lifting water with startling efficiency. But what set his design apart was its practicality. Unlike theoretical sketches of earlier thinkers, Al-Jazari built working models, refining each gear and joint until they moved with seamless precision. His manuscripts didn't just describe ideas, they offered blueprints anyone could follow, complete with instructions like, make sure the axle is perfectly round to avoid wobbling, a detail that reveals his hands-on mastery. The impact of this invention rippled far beyond medieval workshops. When Al-Jazari's texts reached Europe through trade and translation, they became catalysts for the Renaissance's mechanical revolution. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks show crankshaft designs eerily similar to those from the Book of Knowledge, while early industrialists adapted the principle for textile mills and eventually steam engines. Without this transfer of knowledge, the machinery driving the Industrial Revolution might have remained a pipe dream. Yet the crankshaft story isn't just about mechanics, it's about a cultural mindset. Al-Jazari didn't hoard his discoveries, he shared them lavishly, illustrating every invention with meticulous detail so others could build upon his work. His crankshaft wasn't locked away in a royal treasury but deployed in public water systems, easing the daily labor of ordinary people. That ethos innovation in service of society echoes in today's open-source engineering and sustainable design. The next time you turn a bicycle pedal or hear an engine hum, remember, you're experiencing the legacy of a medieval visionary who saw motion not just as physics but as poetry. The next time you lather up with a bar of soap, you're holding more than just a cleaning agent. You're gripping a testament to centuries of chemical refinement. While ancient Babylonians and Egyptians experimented with rudimentary soap-like substances, it was Islamic chemists during the Golden Age who transformed this everyday essential into the solid, fragrant bars we recognize today. Their breakthrough came from a brilliant fusion of chemistry and practicality, replacing animal fats with aromatic vegetable oils like olive and laurel, then combining them with sodium hydroxide through a precise process called saponification. The result, a hard, long-lasting soap that not only cleaned effectively but carried pleasant scents, a luxury compared to the greasy, foul-smelling pastes used elsewhere in the medieval world. But the real revolution wasn't just in the recipe, it was in how this innovation became woven into the fabric of society. Cities like Damascus and Baghdad boasted sprawling public bathhouses, known as hammams, where people from all walks of life could enjoy steaming baths and thorough cleansing. These weren't mere bathing facilities, they were social hubs where hygiene became a cultural priority. Physicians of the time, including luminaries like Al-Idrisi, documented the health benefits of regular washing, linking cleanliness to reduced disease transmission, a radical idea when much of Europe still viewed bathing with suspicion. The hammams even had intricate water systems with separate areas for hot, warm, and cold baths, showcasing an engineering sophistication that matched their medical insights. What's often overlooked is how these soap bars traveled beyond the Islamic world. Crusaders returning from the Middle East brought back stories and samples of these miraculous cleaning blocks, introducing them to European markets where they became coveted luxury items. By the 13th century, soap-making centers had sprung up in places like Spain and Italy, using techniques directly borrowed from Islamic chemists. The very word soap itself may trace its linguistic roots to the Arabic, letter 1 E6 3 Amacron B Umacron N, a subtle reminder of its origins, yet perhaps the most enduring legacy of this invention is how it redefined public health. While the Black Death ravaged populations that avoided regular washing, communities with access to proper soap and bathhouses often fared better, an early glimpse of germ theory in action. From the perfumed soaps of Damascus to the antiseptic scrubs in modern hospitals, this humble bar represents a triumph of science over superstition. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest innovations, those we barely think about as we wash our hands, have quietly reshaped the course of human well-being. The 64 squares of a chessboard hold more than just a game, they're a silent chronicle of cultural exchange. When chess first arrived in Persia from India around the 7th century, it wasn't the strategic masterpiece we know today. Early versions featured elephants and chariots, reflecting Indian warfare, but Persian scholars saw something deeper. They didn't just adopt the game, they reimagined it, transforming each piece into a mirror of their own world. The elephant became the bishop, a nod to the church's influence in Europe, while the chariot evolved into the rook, its name derived from the Persian ruk, meaning chariot, later stylized as the castle turret we recognize today. Even the Queen's rise to power on the board mirrored real-life shifts in political thought. Her newfound mobility, a quiet revolution in gender dynamics centuries before modern feminism. What made this reinvention so enduring wasn't just the aesthetic changes, but the intellectual framework that came with them. Persian mathematicians analyzed chess with the same rigor they applied to algebra, calculating opening moves and in-game strategies that turned casual play into a science. Libraries from Baghdad to Cordoba filled with manuscripts dissecting the game's logic, cementing its reputation as the ultimate test of foresight and cunning. Courts across the Islamic world embraced chess as both entertainment and education. Caliphs played it to hone military tactics, while philosophers used its abstract battles to explore concepts of fate and free will. When the game reached Europe through trade and conquest, it carried this legacy of sophistication, forever altering how the West viewed strategy games. Yet chess's journey reveals something even more profound, how the Islamic Golden Age didn't just preserve knowledge, but refined and repurposed it. Like a master player thinking 10 moves ahead, scholars of the era understood that progress wasn't about rigidly guarding traditions, but adapting them to new contexts. The next time you advance a pawn or sacrifice a knight, you're participating in a dialogue that began over 1,000 years ago, one where borders blurred, ideas merged, and a simple board game became a timeless testament to the power of cultural exchange. Picture a towering brass elephant, its howdah crowned with intricate mechanisms, while a scribe's pen glides across a dial to mark the hours not with silent numbers, but with the chime of tiny cymbals and the parade of automated figurines. This wasn't a scene from a fantastical tale, but the breathtaking reality of Al-Jazari's elephant clock, a 13th century masterpiece that turned timekeeping into theater. Unlike the crude water clocks of antiquity, which merely dripped to mark passing hours, Al-Jazari's design was a symphony of hydraulics, mechanics, and artistry. Every half hour, a ball would roll from the elephant's howdah into a serpent's mouth, triggering a chain reaction. The serpent tipped, the scribe's hand moved, and musical notes rang out, a multisensory spectacle that made time itself tangible. What set this clock apart wasn't just its whimsy, but its astonishing precision. Al-Jazari engineered a float regulator to maintain consistent water pressure, ensuring the clock kept accurate time regardless of how full or empty the reservoir was, a breakthrough anticipating the mechanical escapements of later European clocks. The elephant's design wasn't arbitrary either. It reflected the Islamic world's cosmopolitan trade networks, where elephants symbolized prestige and far-flung connections. Even the chimes were calibrated to cultural rhythms, marking calls to prayer with melodic reminders that science and spirituality could coexist harmoniously. The clock's influence stretched far beyond its brass and gears. When European merchants encountered these marvels in Syrian bazaars or Andalusian palaces, they carried sketches home, sparking a fascination with automata that would flourish in Renaissance workshops. Centuries later, when Swiss watchmakers crafted elaborate cuckoo clocks, they were unknowingly echoing Al-Jazari's fusion of function and spectacle. Yet perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the clock's purpose. It wasn't built for a private collector, but for a public space where anyone, scholar or street vendor, could witness the marriage of ingenuity and beauty. In an age before smartphones synced to atomic time, Al-Jazari's elephant clock did more than tell hours. It celebrated humanity's quest to harness nature's rhythms. The next time you glance at your wristwatch, remember, beneath its digital display beats the heart of an idea sculpted in brass and water, a reminder that even time itself can be shaped by creativity. Centuries before Leonardo da Vinci sketched his famous flying machines, and long before the Wright brothers left the ground at Kitty Hawk, a daring polymath in Islamic Spain turned humanity's oldest dream into a fleeting reality. In the year 875, Abbas ibn Firnas, a man whose curiosity spanned astronomy, poetry, and engineering, stood atop a hill outside Cordoba wearing a revolutionary silk and wood contraption. As onlookers held their breath, he leapt into the wind not as a reckless stuntman, but as a meticulous scientist testing principles that would one day govern modern flight. For 12 exhilarating seconds, his glider caught the air, carrying him farther than any human had flown before. Though the landing was rough, legend claims he injured his back. The impact of that brief flight echoed across history. What set Ibn Firnas apart wasn't just his courage, but his methodical approach. He'd spent years studying birds, noting how their wing curvature and tail movements affected lift and stability. His glider wasn't a haphazard set of wings. It featured adjustable flaps to control airflow, anticipating the ailerons that would later stabilize aircraft. Even his choice of materials revealed genius: lightweight bamboo for the frame, reinforced silk for the wings, balancing strength and flexibility in ways Renaissance inventors would later replicate. Contemporary accounts describe how he'd test smaller models from Cordoba's minarets, refining each design based on how they caught the breeze, a practice shockingly similar to modern wind tunnel experiments. The aftermath of his flight proved just as groundbreaking. Unlike mythological figures like Icarus, whose stories warned against ambition, Ibn Firnas's experiment was celebrated and documented by scholars. His notes on air resistance and weight distribution circulated across the Islamic world, influencing later engineers like Al-Jazari. When Leonardo da Vinci studied flight centuries later, his notebooks included concepts eerily reminiscent of Ibn Firnas's work, evidence of how knowledge transcended borders and eras. Yet the most poignant part of this story isn't the mechanics of the glider, but the mindset behind it. In an age when flight seemed supernatural, Ibn Firnas treated it as a solvable equation, blending art and science to probe nature's boundaries. His legacy isn't just a footnote in aviation history. It's a testament to humanity's tireless urge to reach beyond the possible. Every time a modern plane soars overhead, it carries with it the spirit of that 9th century pioneer who looked at the sky and refused to accept it as a limit. Hidden in every drop of perfume, every sip of fine spirits, and even life-saving medicines lies a process refined to perfection over 1,000 years ago of distillation. While ancient civilizations like the Egyptians and Greeks dabbled in separating liquids through heat, it was Islamic alchemists who transformed this crude technique into a precise science. At the forefront stood Jabir ibn Hayyan, an 8th century visionary whose glass alembics and meticulous temperature control didn't just purify liquids, they unlocked entirely new realms of chemistry. His inventions, resembling intricate glass sculptures with coiled tubes and nested chambers, allowed vapors to rise, condense, and drip into collection flasks with unprecedented purity. This wasn't just about making stronger drinks, it was about isolating the essence of substances, a concept that would redefine everything from pharmacology to industry. What set Jabir's methods apart was his systematic approach. He documented how different heat levels affected various materials, noting that rosewater required gentler temperatures than fermented grains to preserve its delicate fragrance. His writings, filled with detailed diagrams of distillation apparatus, read like modern lab manuals complete with warnings about impure glassware skewing results. The alembic itself, with its bulbous dome and slender spout, became a symbol of scientific progress, its design so effective that it remained virtually unchanged for centuries. European alchemists later copied these blueprints verbatim, crediting Jabir under the Latinized name Geber as they struggled to replicate his results. The real magic of distillation, though, lay in its versatility. Apothecaries used it to concentrate medicinal compounds, creating potent elixirs from plants like lavender and chamomile. Perfumers in Damascus distilled rare floral essences into luxurious oils that traded across continents, while vintners discovered how to refine wines into spirits that could be stored indefinitely, a boon for travelers and traders. Even the rosewater that flavored medieval desserts owed its intensity to these techniques, but perhaps the most profound impact was on medicine. By isolating active ingredients from herbs, physicians could standardize dosages, turning folk remedies into reproducible treatments. Yet distillation's legacy extends beyond the tangible. It embodied a philosophical shift, the idea that nature's secrets could be unlocked through patient experimentation. Jabir didn't just build tools, he crafted a methodology that prioritized observation over dogma, laying groundwork for the scientific method itself. Today, when a distiller crafts whiskey or a chemist purifies vaccines, they're following a path illuminated by those early glass alembics. The next time you catch a whiff of perfume or savor a finely aged spirit, remember, you're experiencing an art form perfected in the fires of the Islamic Golden Age, where curiosity turned simple vapors into the building blocks of modern science. Before emails and telegrams, before even the Pony Express galloped across the American frontier, The Abbasid Caliphate built something extraordinary, a postal network so efficient it could deliver messages from Baghdad to the edges of the empire faster than a galloping horse. This wasn't just a handful of couriers, it was a meticulously engineered system of relay stations, fresh horses, and dedicated roads stretching thousands of miles. At its peak, the Barid, as it was called, could transport official decrees from the heart of Iraq to distant Morocco in under 2 weeks, a feat that would have been unthinkable in medieval Europe, where letters often took months to reach their destinations if they arrived at all. The secret to this speed lay in its structure. Imagine a chain of way stations spaced precisely a day's journey apart, each stocked with fresh mounts and trained riders ready to sprint the next leg. Couriers carried sealed messages marked with wax insignias to prevent tampering, while detailed route maps ensured no time was wasted on wrong turns. But what truly set the Barid apart was its dual purpose. Beyond delivering mail, it functioned as the Caliphate's nervous system, a tool for governance that allowed rulers to monitor provincial officials, circulate tax records, and even receive emergency reports about rebellions or natural disasters. Historians recount how Caliph Al-Mansur once received a basket of freshly picked cherries from Damascus, still glistening with morning dew, thanks to the postal rider's blistering pace. This system's influence rippled far beyond the Islamic world. When Marco Polo marveled at the Mongol Empire's Yam courier network in the 13th century, he was witnessing a direct descendant of the Abbasid model. Later, Europe's royal postal services, including Britain's iconic Royal Mail, borrowed elements from these ancient relay systems. Even the word post itself traces back to the Latin posita, referring to the fixed stations where riders exchanged messages, a concept perfected centuries earlier under the Abbasids. Yet the Barid's legacy isn't just about speed or logistics. It represented a revolutionary idea that communication could and should be a public service, binding a diverse empire together through shared infrastructure. In an age when fragmented kingdoms struggled to govern even small territories, the Abbasids demonstrated how investing in connectivity could sustain power while fostering trade, culture, and unity. The next time you drop a letter in a mailbox or track a package on your phone, remember, you're participating in a tradition shaped by visionaries who understood that empires aren't built on land alone, but on the threads of information weaving them together. Dining in the grand halls of Islamic Spain and Baghdad wasn't just about sustenance, it was a carefully choreographed experience that would redefine how the world eats. While medieval Europeans typically piled all dishes onto trenchers of stale bread for chaotic communal feasting, Islamic courts elevated meals into an art form with the three-course structure we now take for granted. This wasn't arbitrary etiquette. It reflected a scientific approach to digestion and hospitality. Physicians like Ibn Sina championed starting with light, digestive stimulating appetizers like vinegared vegetables, followed by protein-rich mains, and concluding with sweet fruits or honeyed pastries to aid absorption, a nutritional philosophy that doubled as culinary theater. The brilliance of this system lay in its intentional pacing. Imagine a banquet in 10th century Cordoba. Guests first received small plates of olives, nuts, and spiced cheeses to awaken the palate. Then came the showstopper roasted lamb glazed with pomegranate molasses or saffron-infused rice studded with dried fruits served on gleaming brass trays. Only after savoring these flavors would delicate rosewater-scented cakes or quince paste appear, signaling the meal's graceful conclusion. This rhythm wasn't just luxurious, it showcased the host's sophistication through controlled extravagance. Unlike European feasts where food arrived in overwhelming abundance, the three-course model demonstrated restraint and refinement, turning dining into a narrative with rising action and resolution. When this concept reached Europe through trade and diplomacy, it caused nothing short of a culinary revolution. Venetian merchants adopted the practice after witnessing Fatimid banquets in Cairo, while crusaders returning from the Levant brought back tales and tastes of these structured meals. By the Renaissance, Italian nobility had fully embraced the format, adding their own twists like sorbets between courses to cleanse the palate. France's legendary chef Marie-Antoine Carême later codified these ideas into haute cuisine, but the DNA of his multi-course menus traced straight back to those medieval Islamic feasts. Yet the three-course meal's most enduring legacy might be how democratized it became. What began as courtly ritual trickled down to everyday dining, shaping modern restaurant menus and even home cooking. That simple act of ordering an appetizer before your steak or saving room for dessert. It's a 1,000-year-old tradition, perfected by hosts who understood that great meals aren't just about what's on the plate, but how each flavor unfolds in perfect harmony. Caravans laden with silk and spices didn't just traverse the Silk Road with bags of gold, they carried something far lighter and more revolutionary, slips of paper that would change commerce forever. In 9th century Baghdad, merchants faced a dangerous dilemma. How could they conduct business across vast distances without risking highway robbers or the sheer impracticality of hauling chests of coins? Their solution was the sack, a handwritten note that promised payment upon presentation, effectively serving as the world's first check. These weren't crude IOUs, they were standardized documents bearing the issuer's seal, the recipient's name, and even early forms of anti-fraud measures like unique handwriting patterns. A merchant in Cairo could purchase goods from a supplier in Damascus by simply handing over a sack, trusting that the note would be honored by a mutual associate or banking house in another city. The genius of this system lay in its trust-based framework. Unlike today's digital transactions, the sack relied on extensive networks of relationships and reputations. Banking hubs known as Ma'amalat sprang up along trade routes where agents would verify and settle these notes. This required meticulous record-keeping ledgers tracked every transaction, creating an early form of financial accountability. The Caliphate even established regulatory bodies to resolve disputes, ensuring that a sack from Basra held the same value as one from Cordoba. Over time, these practices evolved into sophisticated instruments like the Hawala system, where transfers could occur across continents without physical money ever changing hands, a concept that still underpins global remittance networks today. When European merchants encountered this system during the Crusades, they recognized its potential immediately. Italian city-states like Venice and Florence adapted the sack into the lettera di pagamento, which later morphed into the modern check. Even the word check itself may derive from the Arabic sack, a testament to its origins. But the legacy of these early financial tools isn't just about convenience, it's about democratizing trade. By reducing reliance on bulky currency, the sack enabled smaller merchants to participate in long-distance commerce, fueling economic mobility in ways that reshaped medieval markets. What's often overlooked is how this innovation reflected a broader cultural ethos. In an era when many societies viewed lending with suspicion, the Islamic world embraced financial instruments that balanced risk with mutual benefit. The sack wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a promise, a tangible expression of trust that bridged deserts and dynasties. Today, as you tap your phone to send money across the globe, you're part of a chain that began with those ink-stained notes, proof that the most enduring revolutions aren't always fought with swords, but sometimes penned in quiet corners of a merchant's ledger. Imagine living in a world where losing your eyesight to cataracts meant permanent darkness until a 10th century physician changed everything with a simple, hollow needle. Amr al-Morsili, working in the bustling medical hubs of Baghdad and Cairo, confronted this grim reality head-on. Unlike his contemporaries who relied on crude methods like couching, pushing the clouded lens aside with a blunt instrument, Al-Morsili devised something revolutionary: a slender brass tube with a carefully honed tip, capable of suctioning out the cataract while minimizing damage to the eye. This wasn't just a minor improvement, it was the world's first known extracapsular cataract extraction, a procedure so advanced that modern ophthalmologists wouldn't perfect similar techniques for another 1,000 years. The elegance of Al-Morsili's method lay in its precision. After numbing the eye with a sponge soaked in anesthetic derived from opium and henbane, he inserted the needle through the cornea's edge, puncturing the lens capsule. Then, with a gentle suction, he evacuated the cloudy matter, leaving the posterior capsule intact, a critical detail that reduced complications like retinal detachment. Historical texts describe his patients regaining vision within days, a miracle in an era when blindness was often considered irreversible. What's even more remarkable, his instruments weren't one-off prototypes. They were standardized and replicated across Islamic hospitals, complete with detailed instructions on sterilization using boiling water and vinegar. But the story doesn't end with the needle. Al-Morsili's contributions extended to post-operative care, pioneering the use of medicated bandages soaked in antiseptic solutions to prevent infection. His writings, later translated into Latin under the title De Curatio Cataracti, became required reading for European surgeons during the Renaissance. Figures like Jacques Daville, often credited with inventing modern cataract surgery in the 18th century, openly drew from these medieval texts, adapting techniques that had been refined centuries earlier. Yet perhaps the most profound aspect of this innovation was its democratization of sight. Al-Morsili's procedures weren't reserved for caliphs or nobles. Treatises note that his Baghdad clinic treated merchants, farmers, and even slaves. In a society where medicine was seen as both a science and a moral duty, restoring vision wasn't just about technical skill, it was an act of compassion that transcended social divides. Today, as lasers and artificial lenses make cataract surgery routine, it's worth remembering the origins of this medical triumph. A quiet genius who looked at a needle and saw not just a tool, but a beacon of light in the darkness. For centuries, the night sky was a puzzle humanity struggled to decode until astronomers of the Islamic Golden Age turned stargazing into a precise science. Among them, Al-Battani stood out as a master celestial cartographer, armed with nothing more than an astrolabe, meticulous records, and an unshakable belief that the universe followed mathematical rules. While Ptolemy's geocentric model had dominated for over 1,000 years, placing Earth stubbornly at the center of creation, Al-Battani and his peers didn't just accept ancient Greek wisdom as gospel. They tested it, measured it, and in quiet observatories from Baghdad to Damascus, they began chipping away at its flaws with painstaking observations that would eventually crack the cosmos wide open. What set their work apart wasn't just accuracy, it was methodology. Night after night, Al-Battani charted the paths of planets against fixed stars, noting discrepancies Ptolemy's circular orbits couldn't explain. His calculations revealed something startling. The solar year wasn't 365, 25 days as previously thought, but 365 days, 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 24 seconds, a figure off by just minutes compared to modern measurements. Such precision demanded more than guesswork. It required innovations like the mural quadrant, a wall-mounted instrument that could track celestial movements to fractions of a degree. These tools, combined with rigorous record-keeping, allowed him to detect anomalies in planetary motion that hinted at a far more complex dance than simple circles around Earth. The implications were revolutionary. By proving planets didn't move uniformly, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down, Al-Batani's data planted early seeds of doubt about the geocentric model itself. His star catalogue, the Zij al-Sabai, didn't just correct Ptolemy's errors, it provided the raw material future astronomers like Copernicus would use to argue for a sun-centered universe. When Copernicus cited Albatenius, the Latinized name for Al-Batani, in De Revolutionibus, he wasn't just paying homage, he was standing on the shoulders of a giant whose numbers had quietly dismantled the old cosmic order. Yet the real brilliance of these astronomers lay in their humility. Unlike later thinkers who clung dogmatically to their theories, Islamic scholars treated models as works in progress. Observatories like Maragha, where Nasir al-Din al-Tusi developed his groundbreaking Tusi couple to explain planetary motion without Ptolemy's convoluted epicycles, became crucibles of collaborative refinement. Here, teams of mathematicians, instrument makers, and observers pooled data, debating alternatives in a spirit of collective problem-solving that feels strikingly modern. The legacy of this work stretches far beyond astronomy. By insisting that nature's laws could and should be quantified, these scholars forged a new relationship between math and the physical world. Every time a modern telescope confirms an exoplanet's orbit or a spacecraft slingshots around Jupiter, it's a testament to those who first dared to measure the heavens not as gods but as scientists. The universe, they proved, wasn't a mystery to be worshipped from afar. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, one precise calculation at a time. Beneath the soaring arches of Baghdad's House of Wisdom lay a treasure more valuable than gold, a library so vast it became the beating heart of the Islamic Golden Age. Unlike the scattered scrolls of antiquity or the exclusive manuscript collections of European monasteries, the Great Library of Baghdad wasn't just a storage room for knowledge. It was a living, breathing intellectual ecosystem. With hundreds of thousands of volumes spanning languages from Greek to Sanskrit, this was the world's first truly universal library, where every book was meticulously catalogued using a system that would make modern librarians nod in admiration. Each text received a detailed entry noting its title, author, subject, and even a summary of contents, an innovation so practical it predated the Dewey Decimal System by nearly 1,000 years. What made this catalog revolutionary wasn't just its thoroughness, but its philosophy. Knowledge here wasn't hoarded or hidden, it was organized for discovery. Librarians, known as keepers of books, acted as early search engines, guiding scholars to related works through cross-referenced indexes. Sections were divided by discipline, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and further subdivided by regional traditions, creating a map of human understanding that celebrated diversity rather than dogma. A Persian poet's verses might sit beside a Byzantine treatise on geometry, while Indian mathematical texts shared shelves with Syriac translations of Aristotle. This wasn't accidental chaos but intentional design, reflecting a belief that wisdom flourished at the intersections of cultures. The library's influence extended far beyond its walls. When a visiting scholar requested a rare text on optics, librarians could retrieve it within hours, thanks to a system of numbered shelves and floor plans that mirrored today's call numbers. Copies of popular works were produced in dedicated scriptoriums where teams of scribes and translators worked in shifts to meet demand, an early form of mass publishing. Even the physical space was engineered for study, with reading rooms cooled by ingenious wind catchers and courtyards designed for lively debate. Tragically, much of this treasure was lost when Mongol armies sacked Baghdad in 1258. But the library's legacy survived in the institutions it inspired, from the medical libraries of Salerno to the great university collections of Oxford. Its most enduring gift wasn't just the books it housed, but the radical idea that knowledge belonged to everyone. In an age when literacy was power, the great library democratized learning, proving that the careful organization of ideas could be as transformative as the ideas themselves. Every time you walk into a modern library or search a digital database, you're walking in footsteps laid down by those medieval scholars who believed that to catalog the world was to begin understanding it. Walking through Cordoba after sunset in the 10th century, you wouldn't have stumbled through darkness like in most medieval cities. Instead, you'd find streets gently glowing under the flicker of oil lamps, casting enough light to see the way home or keep night markets bustling. This wasn't a luxury reserved for royal processions. It was a civic innovation that transformed urban life. While Europe's cobbled lanes lay pitch black after dusk, Cordoba's lamps, mounted on walls at regular intervals and fueled by olive oil, turned the city into a beacon of safety and social vitality. But these weren't just scattered torches. They were part of a meticulously planned system, maintained by municipal workers who trimmed wicks and refilled reservoirs, ensuring reliable illumination night after night. The street lamp's impact went far beyond convenience. For the first time, artisans could extend their workshops into evening hours, students could walk home from libraries without fear, and night guards could patrol more effectively. Historians recount how Cordoba's famed leatherworkers and silk weavers used the extra light to meet booming demand from as far as Constantinople and Baghdad. Even the city's legendary public baths stayed open later, their steam mingling with the golden haze of nearby lamps, a scene that would have been unthinkable in shadow-cloaked Paris or London. And it wasn't just Cordoba. Cities like Baghdad and Fez adopted similar systems, with some avenues reportedly lit so brightly that one could recognize a friend's face from across the street. What's often overlooked is the engineering behind these early lamps. Unlike open flames that risked igniting wooden buildings, Cordoba's designs used heat-resistant glass shades to contain the fire, while angled reflectors maximized light distribution. The oil itself, often surplus from Andalusia's vast olive groves, was cheap and abundant, making this one of history's first sustainable public utilities. When Venetian merchants later described these illuminated streets to skeptical Europeans, they weren't just marveling at the technology, they were witnessing a philosophy in action, that a city's greatness could be measured by how it cared for its people after dark. Yet the true brilliance of these lamps lay in what they represented, a belief that public space belonged to everyone at any hour. In an age when darkness often meant danger, the Islamic world redefined night as a time of possibility. Today, as motion sensor LEDs brighten our sidewalks, we're still following the trail blazed by those 10th century lamplighters, proof that sometimes progress isn't about inventing something entirely new, but about daring to imagine a world where no one has to walk in the shadows. Standing in the scorching heart of a Persian desert where summer temperatures could melt lead, you'd expect buildings to be unbearable ovens. Yet step inside a traditional home, and you'd find cool air whispering through its halls. This wasn't magic, it was the genius of the Bajir or wind catcher, an architectural marvel that turned blistering winds into natural air conditioning. Rising gracefully above rooftops like slender sentinels, these towers weren't just decorative. They were meticulously engineered climate control systems, harnessing physics to create comfort centuries before electricity. The secret lay in their clever design. Each wind catcher featured vertical shafts facing prevailing breezes, with openings at the top to scoop air downward. As hot wind entered, it funneled through underground channels or over water reservoirs, where evaporation cooled it dramatically before releasing it into living spaces. The towers also exploited pressure differences. Warmer indoor air rose and escaped through opposite shafts, creating a continuous circulation that kept interiors fresh even during sweltering heat waves. Some structures in cities like Yazd could maintain indoor temperatures 20 degrees cooler than outside without a single watt of energy. What's astonishing is how these structures adapted to their environment. In coastal regions like the Persian Gulf, wind catchers were broad and low to catch humid sea breezes, while desert versions soared tall to capture drier gusts. Some even had adjustable shutters to fine-tune airflow or redirect dust storms. This wasn't guesswork. Persian architects studied wind patterns with near-scientific precision, aligning towers to maximize efficiency. The result, homes, bazaars, and even ice houses stayed cool in summer and warm in winter, thanks to reversible airflow techniques that redirected heat during colder months. The legacy of wind catchers stretches far beyond antiquity. Modern architects from Dubai to Arizona now study these ancient towers for sustainable design inspiration, replicating their passive cooling principles in eco-friendly buildings. Even today, in Iran's historic districts, families still rely on original wind catchers that have functioned flawlessly for over 1,000 years, proof that the best solutions aren't just ingenious but enduring. In an age of climate crisis, these silent sentinels of the desert offer a timeless lesson. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't something new, but wisdom rediscovered. Long before minty toothpaste tubes lined bathroom shelves, the Islamic world was pioneering oral hygiene with a surprising tool, the humble miswak. This teeth-cleaning twig, harvested from the Salvadora persica tree, wasn't just a primitive toothpick. It was a scientifically validated dental aid championed by the Prophet Muhammad himself. Crushing one end to expose bristle-like fibers, users would scrub their teeth and gums with a natural brush loaded with antibacterial compounds, including salvadorine and silica. But what made the miswak truly revolutionary was how it combined spiritual practice with medical wisdom. Cleansing the mouth before prayers became both a ritual act and a health imperative, embedding hygiene into daily life centuries before modern dentistry recognized its importance. Islamic chemists took this innovation even further by crafting early toothpaste formulas that would make today's pharmacists nod in admiration. Manuscripts from 9th century Baghdad describe powders combining ground miswak with salt, honey, and aromatic herbs like thyme, ingredients now known to fight plaque and freshen breath. Physicians like Al-Idrisi recommended specific mixtures for gum disease, while traveler Ibn Battuta noted how these powders were sold in bustling bazaars from Damascus to Delhi, proving oral care wasn't just for elites. Some recipes even included charcoal for whitening and crushed oyster shells as a primitive abrasive, anticipating modern toothpaste additives by nearly 1,000 years. The real brilliance of these practices lay in their holistic approach. While medieval Europe often treated tooth decay with painful extractions or superstitious remedies, Islamic medical texts like Al-Zarawi's Kitab al-Tasrif detailed preventive care, advising regular cleaning to avoid cavities and even describing early fillings made of resin and alum. Excavations in Islamic Spain uncovered personal hygiene kits containing miswak twigs alongside tiny metal tongue scrapers and cloths for polishing teeth, revealing a culture that viewed dental care as essential as eating or sleeping. Yet the miswak's legacy extends beyond history books. Modern studies confirm its fibers release antimicrobial agents that rival commercial toothbrushes in reducing plaque, prompting the World Health Organization to endorse it as an effective alternative in regions lacking dental infrastructure. In a world obsessed with electric brushes and whitening strips, this ancient twig offers a quiet reminder. Sometimes the simplest solutions stand the test of time because they were rooted in wisdom, not just convenience. The next time you reach for your toothbrush, remember, you're part of a tradition that turned daily routine into an act of both health and heritage. Navigating the world in the 12th century meant relying on patchy sketches and travelers' tales until Muhammad Al-Idrisi redefined what a map could be. Commissioned by King Roger Roman II of Sicily, this Moroccan cartographer didn't just draw coastlines. He wove together centuries of maritime logs, merchant diaries, and astronomical data into a masterpiece called the Tabula Rogeriana. Imagine a massive silver disc weighing over 300 pounds, etched with a breathtakingly accurate inversion of the world as they knew it south positioned at the top. Continents sprawled across a grid of climate zones, each detail painstakingly verified by a team of scholars and explorers. This wasn't guesswork, it was science, blending empirical observation with mathematical precision in a way no European map had attempted. What set Al-Idrisi apart was his methodical approach. While European Mappi Mundi still depicted mythical creatures and biblical landmarks, his work dismissed fantasy in favor of verifiable facts. He cross-referenced accounts from Viking traders in the Baltic with Arab geographers' notes on the Niger River, and even incorporated data from Silk Road envoys about China's coastline. Rivers snaked across his maps at proportional distances, mountain ranges rose where travelers confirmed their existence, and cities appeared only after multiple sources agreed on their coordinates. The result, a map so reliable that Mediterranean sailors reportedly used copies for navigation well into the 14th century. The ripple effects of this cartographic revolution were profound. When Al-Idrisi's texts reached Europe, they shattered long-held myths about uninhabitable torrid zones near the equator, opening minds to new exploration possibilities. His climate-based division of the world into 7 latitudinal regions became foundational for later geographers, while his descriptions of distant lands like Sela, likely Korea, expanded horizons beyond the Mediterranean-centric view. Christopher Columbus is said to have studied versions of Al-Idrisi's maps before his voyages, relying on their depiction of Atlantic currents, though he tragically misread the scale, underestimating Earth's size and mistaking the Caribbean for Asia. Yet the true genius of these maps lay in their collaborative spirit. Al-Idrisi didn't work in isolation. His Palermo workshop buzzed with Jewish translators, Christian monks, and Muslim astronomers, all contributing fragments of knowledge. This cultural synthesis birthed something unprecedented, a global vision that transcended political or religious divides. Today, as satellites map every inch of our planet, we're still following Al-Idrisi's guiding principle that the world makes most sense when we piece it together through many eyes, one verified detail at a time. The melodies that shape our world today, from symphonies to pop songs, trace their roots back to a time when music wasn't just art, but a science meticulously decoded by scholars like Al-Farabi. In the 10th century, while much of Europe treated music as mere entertainment, this polymath from the Islamic Golden Age was dissecting its very essence in his groundbreaking Kitab al-Musica al-Kabir, the Great Book of Music. Imagine a manuscript so comprehensive it mapped the physics of sound waves, the mathematics of scales, and even the psychological effects of different rhythms, a fusion of science and art that would echo through concert halls for centuries. Al-Farabi's genius lay in systematizing what had been intuitive, He identified precise mathematical ratios behind pleasing harmonies, proving why certain intervals like the octave or fifth sounded naturally harmonious to the human ear. His detailed diagrams of the oud's fret positions revealed how slight adjustments could produce microtones, those haunting quarter steps that give Middle Eastern music its distinctive flavor. But he didn't stop at theory. He engineered improvements to instruments themselves, redesigning the canon's bridges to enhance resonance and documenting how different woods affected sound quality, principles still used by luthiers crafting guitars and violins today. The ripple effects of this work were profound. When Al-Farabi's treatises reached medieval Europe through translations in Toledo and Sicily, they ignited a musical revolution. Troubadours adapted his modal scales into Gregorian chants, while composers like Guido d'Arezzo used his interval theories to develop modern musical notation. Even the word lute derives from the Arabic al-aud, a testament to this cross-cultural exchange. What's often overlooked is how these ideas transcended genres. Persian dastgah modes found their way into Spanish flamenco, while Central Asian rhythms infused Balkan folk music, all filtered through the frameworks Al-Farabi and his peers had articulated. Yet the most striking aspect of this musical revolution wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. Al-Farabi argued that music could heal as well as entertain, prescribing specific maqams, melodic modes, for ailments like depression or insomnia. Modern music therapy now confirms what he intuited, that the Rast mode's uplifting tones can reduce anxiety, while the Saba mode's melancholy strains aid emotional release. In an age before oscilloscopes or decibel meters, these scholars listened with both their ears and their intellects, proving that the universal language of music could be translated into equations without losing its soul. Today, when a pianist's fingers fly across keys tuned to equal temperament or a pop producer tweaks a synth's harmonics, they're channeling discoveries made in candlelit Baghdad workshops. The next time you get chills from a perfect chord progression, remember, you're feeling the reverberations of a 1,000-year-old science, one that dared to measure the immeasurable and found music's hidden architecture. Beneath the shade of Al-Andalus's orange groves and the terraced gardens of Persia, a quiet agricultural revolution was taking root, one that would transform dinner tables across the world. While medieval Europe relied on rudimentary farming practices, Islamic botanists were compiling encyclopedic manuals like the Book of Agriculture by Ibn al-Awwam, a 12th century masterpiece that blended science, poetry, and hands-on wisdom. These weren't just lists of plants, they were comprehensive guides detailing everything from soil pH testing using natural indicators like vinegar and lentils, to advanced grafting techniques that could turn a single almond tree into a multi-bearing wonder producing both sweet and bitter varieties. The real game changer, their meticulous documentation of crops like citrus, eggplants, and sugarcane plants native to Asia that Islamic scholars introduced to Europe through expansive trade networks and experimental gardens. Take the humble orange, originally cultivated in Southeast Asia. These golden fruits traveled along Silk Road routes to Islamic Spain, where botanists perfected their cultivation in elaborate orchard systems. Al-Awwam's manual specified exact irrigation schedules for citrus trees, noting how alternating wet and dry periods intensified their sweetness, a technique still used in Valencia's famed groves today. Similarly, eggplants, once dismissed in Europe as mad apples believed to cause fever, were rehabilitated by Islamic agronomists who documented their nutritional value and developed roasting methods to eliminate bitterness. These innovations didn't just fill stomachs, they reshaped cuisines, turning once exotic ingredients into Mediterranean staples. The brilliance of these manuals lay in their interdisciplinary approach. Botany wasn't isolated from other sciences. It intertwined with chemistry in the development of fertilizers like potassium-rich chili, with engineering in the design of water-lifting norias for irrigation, and even with medicine in the classification of plants by therapeutic properties. Gardens became living laboratories where specimens from as far as India and Mali were acclimated through controlled cross-pollination, creating hardier strains that could thrive in diverse climates. When Frederick Roman II of Sicily sought to revive his kingdom's agriculture, he turned to Arabic texts, transplanting entire orchards and irrigation methods that would later inspire the Renaissance's botanical gardens. Yet the most enduring legacy of these manuals might be their philosophical shift, viewing agriculture not as drudgery, but as a dialogue with nature. Al-Jazari wrote of talking to plants, believing tender care yielded better harvests, while other texts emphasized crop rotation's role in soil rest, centuries before modern ecology confirmed its benefits. Today, as sustainable farming returns to these ancient practices, from drought-resistant canal irrigation to companion planting, we're rediscovering a truth those medieval botanists knew all along: that the Earth's bounty grows richest when tended with both curiosity and reverence. Imagine a world where every book had to be painstakingly copied onto expensive parchment made from animal skins, a process so costly that libraries were the exclusive domain of kings and monasteries. Now picture the seismic shift when crisp, affordable paper began flowing from the mills of Baghdad and Damascus, turning knowledge from a luxury into something anyone could hold in their hands. This wasn't just a change in materials, it was a revolution in thought, and it all began with a fateful encounter at the Battle of Tollas in 751. When Abbasid forces clashed with Tang dynasty troops near the Sadaria River, they captured Chinese artisans who carried a priceless secret: the art of turning mulberry bark and hemp into smooth, foldable sheets. The genius of Islamic papermakers wasn't just in replicating this technology, but in refining it. While Chinese paper relied on delicate rice starch coatings, Middle Eastern mills innovated with linen and flax rags, creating a stronger, more absorbent surface perfect for the flowing scripts of Arabic. Factories in Baghdad's industrial suburbs used water-powered trip hammers to pulp fibers, a mechanization that boosted output to staggering levels. One mill in Játiva, Spain, reportedly produced over 100,000 sheets annually. But the real breakthrough came in standardization. Paper was sized into consistent sheets, bundled into reams, and even given quality grades, creating the world's first truly scalable writing medium. What made paper transformative was its ripple effect. Suddenly, merchants could keep detailed ledgers without bankrupting themselves on parchment. Students copied textbooks for pennies instead of gold coins. And the House of Wisdom's translators could churn out hundreds of copies of Greek philosophy or Indian mathematics, creating a knowledge explosion that reached from Cordoba's libraries to the markets of Samarkand. Even bureaucracy changed. Caliphs replaced bulky scrolls with nimble paper documents, streamlining governance in ways Europe wouldn't match for centuries. Yet the most profound impact was cultural. Paper didn't just transmit ideas, it reshaped how people thought. The fluidity of Arabic script on paper's smooth surface birthed new artistic forms like calligraphy, while the portability of books turned scholarship into a mobile pursuit. When Ibn Battuta embarked on his 30-year journey across Afro-Eurasia, his satchel brimmed with paper notebooks, a luxury Marco Polo just decades earlier could never have imagined. In the crinkle of those pages lay the sound of walls crumbling as knowledge slipped from the grasp of elites and into the hands of anyone who dared to learn. In the bustling markets of 9th century Cairo, a traveler quenching their thirst from a public fountain might not have realized they were drinking from one of history's most life-saving innovations. a sophisticated water filter. While ancient civilizations like the Greeks and Romans built aqueducts to move water, Islamic engineers tackled a far more elusive challenge, making it safe to drink. Their solution was as elegant as it was effective: multi-layered filtration systems combining sand, gravel, and even crushed charcoal to trap sediment, parasites, and foul odors long before microscopes revealed the dangers lurking in every drop. The genius of these systems lay in their scalability. In cities like Basra, where brackish river water threatened public health, engineers constructed massive filtration basins where water trickled through graded layers of pebbles, coarse sand, and fine sand, each stratum removing impurities of decreasing size. Some designs even incorporated woven cloth filters or porous ceramic vessels inspired by earlier Persian techniques. But what set these projects apart wasn't just their engineering, it was their democratic intent. Unlike Roman aqueducts that primarily served elites, Islamic filtration systems fed public baths, mosques, and neighborhood cisterns, ensuring clean water for all social classes. Physician Al-Idrisi famously prescribed filtered water to patients with digestive ailments, noting its clarity reduced humoral imbalances, a medieval recognition of its health benefits. These innovations didn't stop at sand. Persian polymath Al-Karaji's book of the extraction of hidden waters detailed how to line reservoirs with clay to prevent contamination, while Andalusian engineers added gravity-fed settling tanks to remove heavy sediments before filtration. The zimbil, a conical cloth filter used by travelers, could be rolled up and carried in a saddlebag, making clean water portable centuries before camping filters. Even the iconic Qanat systems, those underground channels tapping mountain aquifers, incorporated filtration grates at intake points to screen debris. The legacy of these early water doctors flows straight into our taps today. Modern municipal plants still use graded sand filtration as a foundational step, while charcoal purification echoes the activated carbon in today's pitcher filters. Perhaps the most poignant proof of their foresight emerged when archaeologists uncovered a medieval Islamic filter in Granada, its layers still intact after 8 centuries. Testing revealed it could remove over 90% of common bacteria, a staggering efficiency for its time. In a world where unsafe water still claims millions of lives annually, these ancient engineers offer a timeless lesson that the truest mark of civilization isn't just controlling water, but cherishing its purity. The steady drip of water measured more than just seconds. It marked the moment when humanity first tamed time itself. In the early 13th century, while European monasteries still relied on sundials and candle clocks, Ismail Al-Jazari was perfecting a marvel of engineering. Water-powered mechanical clocks so precise they could divide the day into equal hours, a radical concept in an era when daylight hours varied with the seasons. His crowning achievement, the elephant clock, wasn't just a timekeeper. It was a symphony of gears, floats, and escapements that transformed the flow of water into a measurable rhythm, laying the groundwork for every mechanical clock that followed. What set Al-Jazari's clocks apart was their intricate interplay of mechanics and artistry. Picture a towering brass structure where a water-filled basin regulated a system of weights and pulleys. As water trickled from one chamber to another at a controlled rate, it triggered a series of movements: gears turned, figurines rotated, and even tiny doors opened to reveal changing scenes. The escapement mechanism, arguably his most groundbreaking innovation, converted the continuous force of flowing water into regulated, intermittent motion, the same principle that would later govern pendulum clocks and modern wristwatches. These weren't just functional devices, they were theatrical performances of precision, designed to awe as much as to inform. The societal impact of these clocks was profound. In mosques, they synchronized prayer times with unprecedented accuracy, replacing the imprecise calls of human observers. Markets adopted them to standardize trading hours, while irrigation systems used simplified versions to allocate water fairly among farmers. For the first time, communities could coordinate activities beyond the rise and fall of the sun, creating a shared temporal framework that transcended individual perception. This was more than convenience, it was a cultural shift, embedding the idea of measurable collective time into daily life. Yet the true legacy of these inventions lies in their diffusion. When Al-Jazari's manuscripts reached Europe via Crusader encounters and Andalusian translations, they ignited a horological revolution. Medieval monks adapted his water clock designs for their scriptoriums, while Renaissance engineers like Giovanni da Dondi studied his escapement mechanisms to build the first astronomical clocks. The very word clock itself traces back to the Arabic sa'a, a linguistic footprint of this transfer of knowledge. In an age where atomic clocks measure billionths of a second, it's easy to forget how revolutionary it was to simply count hours equally. Al-Jazari's clocks did more than mark time. They taught us to see it as a universal constant, something that could be sliced, shared, and synchronized. Every time you glance at a wristwatch or check your phone for the hour, you're witnessing the ripple effect of a 13th century genius who looked at dripping water and saw the heartbeat of civilization. The echoes of the Islamic Golden Age reverberate through every corner of our modern world, yet their origins often remain hidden in plain sight. Consider the humble coffee cup in your hand. Its journey from Ethiopian highlands to global ubiquity was paved by Sufi monks and bustling Cave-Khanes, just as the algebraic equations powering your smartphone trace back to Al-Idrisi's systematic calculations. These weren't merely historical footnotes, they were seismic shifts that redefined what humanity could achieve. When Renaissance scholars pored over Latin translations of Arabic texts in Toledo's translation schools, they were standing on the shoulders of giants whose names had been erased by time and shifting political tides. What makes this legacy so extraordinary is how thoroughly these innovations became embedded in global culture, often divorced from their roots. The hospitals where modern surgeons perform life-saving procedures still follow floor plans pioneered in Baghdad's Al-Idrisi hospital, with its specialized wards and rigorous physician training. The very concept of a university degree, that formal certification of expertise, flows directly from Fatima al-Fihri's vision in 9th century Fez. Even the checks we write or digital payments we authorize descend from the SAC system that once enabled Silk Road merchants to trade across continents without carrying chests of gold. This transfer of knowledge wasn't always peaceful or voluntary. Crusaders returning from the Levant brought back more than war stories. They carried medical treatises, agricultural techniques, and architectural blueprints that would reshape Europe. The Norman kings of Sicily employed Arab engineers to build their palaces, complete with cooling wind towers and intricate water clocks. Yet as these ideas spread westward, their provenance often faded, repackaged as new discoveries by later generations. The Astrolabe became a European navigational tool, algebra turned into Newton's calculus, and Al-Jazari's crankshaft powered the Industrial Revolution, all while their creators' names slipped into obscurity. Today's scientific method itself bears the fingerprints of this era. The rigorous experimentation championed by Ibn al-Haytham in optics, the peer review practiced in House of Wisdom debates, the interdisciplinary approach blending medicine with chemistry and astronomy, these formed the DNA of modern research. When Nobel Prize-winning chemist Ahmed Zewail credited Ibn al-Haytham as the world's first true scientist, he wasn't offering hollow praise but recognizing a methodological lineage stretching back a millennium. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what enabled this golden age, a culture that valued curiosity over dogma, embraced diverse perspectives, and invested in public knowledge. The great libraries of Baghdad and Cordoba weren't just storehouses but vibrant forums where Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars debated freely. This openness stands as both inspiration and challenge in our fragmented world. As we type on keyboards derived from Arabic numeral systems or gaze through lenses perfected by Islamic opticians, we're reminded that progress isn't the property of any one civilization. It's a collective inheritance, passed hand to hand across borders and centuries. The true tribute to these forgotten pioneers isn't just remembering their names, but reigniting their spirit of boundless inquiry that once illuminated the world. From the Astrolabe guiding sailors across uncharted seas to the precise equations of algebra unlocking the cosmos, the Islamic Golden Age didn't just invent objects, it reimagined how humanity interacts with the world. These weren't isolated flashes of brilliance, they were threads in a grand tapestry of innovation, woven by scholars who refused to accept boundaries between disciplines. Consider the hospital wards of Baghdad, where physicians like Al-Idrisi blended chemistry, ethics, and clinical observation to heal, or the workshops of Al-Jazari, where artistry and engineering fused into mechanical marvels. This was an era that didn't ask, is this science or art, but rather, how can both serve humanity? What makes these contributions timeless isn't just their utility, but the mindset behind them. The Golden Age thrived because it embraced a radical idea that knowledge grows strongest when shared across cultures and faiths. Persian mathematicians built on Greek geometry, Andalusian botanists cultivated Asian crops, and Jewish translators in Toledo rendered Arabic texts into Latin, each act of collaboration adding another layer to humanity's collective wisdom. Even the humble fountain pen, born from a caliph's frustration with ink stains, reflects this ethos. Innovation flourishes when practical problems meet creative solutions. Yet history has a way of burying its brightest chapters. For centuries, many of these breakthroughs were misattributed, their origins obscured by time and geopolitical shifts. The crankshaft became synonymous with European industry, the camera obscura credited to Renaissance painters, and the three-course meal labeled as French haute cuisine. Rediscovering these stories isn't just about setting the record straight, it's a reminder that progress is never the work of a single culture. It's a chorus of voices, each adding a vital verse. As we close this journey, think of the Astrolabe gathering dust in a museum. It's more than a relic, it's an invitation to approach problems with the same boundless curiosity that turned a brass disc into a window to the stars or a twig into a tool for dental hygiene. The Golden Age's greatest legacy isn't just what was invented, but how, with open minds, relentless experimentation, and a conviction that no idea is too bold to explore. If these stories sparked your imagination, let us know which invention amazed you most. Was it the wind catchers cooling desert homes, or the surgical instruments that predated modern medicine by centuries? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're craving more hidden histories, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, remember, every time you solve an equation, sip coffee, or check the time, you're touching the fingerprints of a golden era that still shapes our world. Keep looking closer, because history's most fascinating chapters are often the ones we've forgotten to